Remember spring as you walk past a frozen lake in winter. Listen, the music calls you.
Good evening, Lincoln, and welcome to another episode of the J Train right here on KZUM 89.3, of course, on your FM radio dial in Lincoln and all around the world at www.kzum.org. My name is Jesse Starita, and this is part of the Jazz in June interview series, and this evening we'll be featuring the words and music of jazz vocalist Kendra Shank, and she's currently joining me on the phone line in New York City. Kendra, thank you so much for being on board the J Train.
Hi there, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be chatting with you.
I wanted to ask you about living this whole gamut of a musician's life, from strumming inside of Parisian subways to sold-out shows at major European jazz festivals and crowded engagements in smoky New York City nightclubs. Were you always expected that you would be when you started out in your career musically?
Well, no. I kind of had no expectations. I started playing music just as a way to express myself as a hobby. At the time, I was 13 when I got my first guitar and started playing and singing. And at that point, it was just, as a beginner. And at that point, I thought I was going to be a visual artist. From the time I was very young, I thought my calling was to be a visual artist, and that's actually what I studied in school, was art. And then somehow the music became my profession. And at one point, I suppose within, as you just said, I started playing in the street in Paris and in the subway when I was 19. That was the beginning of my professional career, or semi-professional at the time, I guess. And by the time I graduated college, it had become much more of a calling. And I realized that when I graduated college, rather than going into graduate school doing glass blowing, which is what I had planned as a visual artist, I decided to just keep playing music for a while and see where it would take me. And the rest is history.
Well, and Kendra will be performing at the opening of this season's Jazz in June, and that's Tuesday, June 4th at 7 p.m. at the Sheldon Art Gallery. And Kendra, I'll be the MC for the evening as well, so I'll have a chance to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. Then I'll have a face to put with the... So you've seen my face. I haven't seen yours. So.
Well, I wanted to ask something that I thought about as a connection to the first question, and that is, during your time in France, did you become fluent in French?
Yeah, I did. That was the other thing I studied in college. I actually had a double major, visual art and French language, and I became fascinated with French at a young age, and studied it starting, I guess, when I was 14 in junior high school. And then I went to study. The first time I ever went to Paris was as a student when I was 17. I was still in high school, and I went there specifically to study language. So by the time I was performing in Paris, I was fluent. I actually kind of became French and was kind of bicultural. I say was because now I've been away from France so long that the French part of me has begun to fade a little bit. I'm not as fluent as I used to be, but I actually passed for French back in the day when I lived there. There was a period of my life where I had a residence in Paris and one in the U.S., so I shared each year 6 months in the U.S. and 6 months in Paris.
Rejoue-moi sur ton piano droit, tous ces refrains tranquilles, ces airs d'autrefois. Dans tes yeux bémols, j'ai trouvé la clé.
I had an experience in 2011. I spent almost the whole year abroad in Brazil and became...
I would love to go there.
Yeah, you'll have to do it. It's a wonderful place, and worked on my Portuguese, which was non-existent before leaving, but then progressed because I was in a city where there were very few English speakers, which was, of course, great for my Portuguese. And so I came back home, and I would often, learning a second language affected the way that I spoke English. And I'm just wondering, as a singer, if being bilingual had or has an influence on the way you inflect and interpret particular pieces of music.
Yeah, it did very much, and even more so when I was more, well, and I would still consider myself bilingual. It's just that, I was fluent to the point where when I came back to the States and started living here in the U.S. full time again, there were times when I was thinking in French so much that I would have to translate back. I had difficulty speaking English sometimes because a thought would come to me in French and I couldn't think of the English word for it, and I would have to kind of translate backward. And sometimes and then I also spoke English with kind of a strange accent. It wasn't exactly a French accent, but it wasn't really an American accent either. And it's interesting how the brain works, because it's sort of like the little computer chips in there would sort of collide, like I would get stuck between two languages. And I don't know if that ever happened to you with Portuguese, where sometimes I would just get stymied, where it would be almost like my thoughts would have a little train crash, and I couldn't get a thought out because my little brain would get so confused. But anyway, it was to answer your question. Yeah, I think it did affect. It definitely affected my singing too, because my voice is different when I sing in French than when I sing in English. It's like the music is the pronunciation of those sounds seems to place my voice in a different place when I sing in French as opposed to when I sing in English, and that's interesting too.
Wow, that's fascinating. If you're just joining me, my guest on the phone is Kendra Shank, and it's been 6 years since Kendra Shank was last in Lincoln, gracing the stage of the Sheldon Art Gallery for Jazz in June, and she's going to be coming back with her band, of course, her fantastic quartet, on Tuesday, June the 4th, and that'll open up the Jazz in June series at 7 p.m. I wanted to ask you, Kendra, about how you came to work with this wonderful quartet that I've had the chance to hear live, and also on recordings like Mosaic and A Spirit Free. How was it that you met Frank Kimbrough and Dean Johnson and Tony Moreno?
Yeah, we've been together 14 years now, and I've actually been playing with Frank since 1992. So Frank and I go back even further than the quartet as a whole. God, he's just the most wonderful pianist and person. I met him through Shirley Horn. Shirley Horn, for those who don't know, the great pianist and singer, and she called Frank Kimbrough, who was another one of her sort of protégés, and asked him to play with me. And that's how I met Frank, was playing at the Village Vanguard on my New York debut. And he was so sweet and so beautiful that I wound up continuing my collaboration with him until this very day. And then Frank is the one who introduced me to both Dean Johnson and Tony Moreno, our other two band members.
Well, if you're just joining me, my guest on the phone right now is Kendra Shank, jazz vocalist and guest on the J Train, and she'll be in Lincoln live on Tuesday, June the 4th from 7 until 9 p.m. at the Sheldon Art Gallery. and that'll open up the Jazz in June concert series. If you'd like more information on the series in general, www.jazzinjune.com. I've been listening to Mosaic a lot lately and really like the whole sound of the album. And I wanted to ask, what's next in the pipeline? That album came out a couple of years ago, and are you working on music that is similar to Mosaic, or do you have a project that goes off in a completely different road?
I actually do have a project that goes off in a completely different road and with a different collaborator. I do want to record a new album with the quartet that you're going to hear at Jazz in June, my band of 14 years, because they are my primary band and the band that I have focused on for the last 14 years, and we will record another album together. But meanwhile, something else just kind of fell in my lap and took me off in another direction. So that is a collaboration with John Stoll, who's a wonderful guitarist who lives in Portland, Oregon. And when I lived in Seattle, Washington, I lived there for 18 years before moving to New York. So anyway, he, for years, has been asking me to do a duo record with him, just voice and guitar. And I kept putting it off because I was so focused on the piano quartet with Frank Kimbrough. But last year, John was out here on the East Coast on tour and invited me in the studio. He had some free studio time at a studio that's owned by a friend of his, and he said, "Why don't you just come in and just play around? Let's just no plan, just come in and let's just fool around in the studio. It doesn't cost us anything." And it went so well, and it was so interesting that we decided to do some more sessions and actually make an album. And on that project, I'm using a looping device. For those of your listeners who don't know what that is, a looper is an electronic device that I can plug my vocal mic into it, and I can sing a phrase and record that phrase and have it loop around and continually repeat. That phrase will just repeat over and over and over. And then I can add another phrase on top of that, and it will loop around. And then I can add another phrase on top of that. So I can create, it's almost like I can multi-track an improvised composition on the spot.
Well, you're going to have to bring that outfit and that particular side of Kendra Shank back to another Jazz in June in 2014.
Yes, well, maybe when this album comes out, which we hope will should happen in 2014, then yes, we'll certainly have, because I won't be bringing the looper with this group. It doesn't. It works in the duo situation because there's only two of us and there's so much empty space to be filled, and it enables me to sort of create parts that another instrument might have filled.
Well, I wanted to conclude the interview by offering you an opportunity to share with the listeners resources on the internet, perhaps, where they can go to learn more about you and your music. Oh,
sure. Yeah. Well, there's my website is the first place you should go to. So that's www.kendrashank.com, just my name, which is KendraShank, kendrashank.com. And then you can also find me. You can so at the website you can hear samples from all my CDs are there. You can hear samples. You can purchase CDs. You can read interviews and see press reviews. You can see photographs, biographical information. Everything about me is on there. However, that site doesn't have videos yet. So to see videos of me, you would go to YouTube. youtube.com/Kendra Shank, and that's where you can find my videos. You can also find me on Facebook, and I'm also on MySpace.
Wonderful. Kendra, I just wanted to say merci beaucoup for your time.
De rien.
Your accent is so much better than mine.
I was going to ask you to speak some Portuguese to me. I love the sound of Portuguese. It's so pretty.
Well, then I would say obrigado por seu tempo pela entrevista.
Oh, wow. C'est extrêmement joli quand tu parles en portugais.
Well, the next time I'll ask questions in Portuguese and you can just respond in French.
There we go. Thank you. We're really looking forward to playing. Jazz in June is always a highlight for us.